Hey Lost fans, how are you? It is Jacob, and you are here to watch SeanieB's final recap video after 10 long years. Hey guys, I'm sorry for the delay. He was on the island. I thought he was a candidate. You know how that goes, but I thought wrong. So look, sit back, grab your popcorn, and enjoy the final Lost recap.
It's strange, huh?
What's that?
Being back.
Look, I've been preparing for this for years.
I need for you to explain to me what the hell's going on inside your head.
And if you leave, that knowledge is going to eat you alive until you decide to come back. Do you want to know a secret? Everything that happened for a reason.
That's impossible.
Please, you have to come back.
You wanted the secrets of the island? Well, here they are.
I want some friggin' answers. This is my destiny. Right now, I can do this. Don't tell me what I can't do.
You have to go back.
You have to go back. You need to come back.
We have to go back. I'm supposed to do this, damn it.
Hello, my old friends. It's me, SeanieB, and I'm so excited to officially be back on YouTube after so long away from you guys, to see you all once again and to finally deliver on a promise that I made over a decade ago. This is the Lost Final Recap.
We have to go back. Dude, you're alive!
You have no idea how long I've wanted to say that and how much I've missed you guys. Believe it or not, a lot of the best memories of my life were from that time period where I made these recaps. Barely a day goes by where I don't think about this community. You guys are the reason I'm making this video. Your passion for Lost and constant desire to have this video made is what ultimately inspired me to actually make the video. I'm gonna do a few intro items first, so if you want to skip to the actual recap portion of this video, go to this time frame. Also, if you're watching me on a computer, YouTube added this new feature where there's chapters on the actual progress bar, so you can see below. You can actually skip through and navigate a lot more easily. This final recap video is primarily focused on the actual last episode, but I'm also going to be doing a recap of the series as a whole at the beginning of this recap, just because it has been so long. A lot of us have forgotten the lead up to the final episode, so I think this will get us caught up. I don't want to spend too much time reliving the past during this long, and I mean long, video. So if you haven't already seen my Where Has SeanieB Been video from a couple weeks ago, make sure to check that out at the end of this recap. I'll put up a link to that. It explains why I never did the final recap, what I've been up to these past 10 years, and what I'm planning on doing on YouTube after this recap. Since Lost finished over a decade ago, I've watched the series back multiple times, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have, but it's been a few years since I watched it the last time, so in preparation for this video, I made sure to watch it again. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this too, but when you're watching it back, there's just so many things that you forget when you don't watch it for a while. And honestly, rewatching the final episode several times, it's actually changed my opinion on the final episode, which I'll talk about at the end of this recap. Lost was such an impactful show on my life, and I remember I used to watch it every week with my family, and then I'd come upstairs and talk with all of you guys about the most insane theories, and we'd find hidden secrets and decipher hieroglyphics and ancient cuneiform. And I remember it being just so fun reliving that episode with all of you guys. And it was more than just a show to me, it was like an experience. It was a change of perception. It asked questions about the nature of existence and what's meaningful in life, and by what measure do we find value at the end of life. It also connected me to so many of you guys for over a decade now and provided me with memories that will be really hard for another show to top. Now, before we get started, just a couple more notes. First, and only because I've been asked this actually a lot recently, yes, I will be doing the Subliminal image competition in this video just like we did in every video in the past. And this one will be cool because there's an actual prize. For those who are new here or maybe don't remember, because let's be real, it's been a decade. In each recap video that I used to do, I would hide 5 random images anywhere throughout the video, and they'd be 1 frame long, just a little tiny flash, a subliminal image, kind of like Lost used to do in some of the different episodes, especially when it came to room 23. And what I'd have you guys do is in the comment section tell me when the images came out in the video and what the actual images were. And the first 10 people to comment on that would end up being mentioned in the next video. But this is the final recap we're talking about, not just some ordinary video. And I've made you guys wait 10 years, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm still gonna put up 5 images, really quick images throughout this video. The difference this time is every single person who comments down below what the images are and when they come out will have their names added to a wheel. And in a couple weeks, weeks, I'll put up a video of me spinning the wheel and it will randomly select one winner. And you also have to be subscribed to my channel. So what is the grand prize? Tell them what they win, game show host guy.
You know him as the God of Lost, the protector of the island, the creepy man in the cabin. He loved his home so much that he caused innocent people to crash on an island just to find someone to relieve him of his work duties. The grand prize winner will become a candidate and hear from the man himself, the one, the only, Jacob. Find the hidden images in this video, write them in the comments section, subscribe to SeanieB, and win a personalized video message from actor Mark Pellegrino, more commonly known as Jacob.
God bless you.
And the last thing I want to tell you guys before we start is that just in case you haven't seen the teaser videos, more Lost related videos are coming after this recap. Videos that dive into all the unanswered questions so I can take a deep dive analysis into those specific topics, like the numbers and the origin of the smoke monster and Walt and so much more. It makes it so this video isn't 5 hours long and those videos and subjects get the proper time they deserve. Plus, I can't make you wait 10 years and only give you one Lost video, right? And not just Lost content too, but a lot of other really cool videos like travel videos and other recaps of other shows, which I still want you guys to give me your suggestions on shows that I should watch, and then maybe editing tutorials and life vlogs and so much more. So please do me a favor, if you haven't already yet, make sure to subscribe and click that notification bell. That way you actually see the videos when they pop up, and it would really help me out a lot. So with all that out of the way, let's actually finally, after 10 long years, get into why you guys are all here to recap the final episode of Lost, review the series as a whole, answer some questions, discover some hidden secrets, and relive one of the greatest shows of all time. Since it has been so long, and I'm sure we've forgotten a lot of the details during this past decade, I wanted to spend some time recapping the series as a whole first, just so we can all get caught up to speed. More so focusing on the lore and the history of the big events leading up to the end, and not really talking about the Flight 815 survivors or their journey or backstories or relationships. I wanted to recap the show in chronological order and not episode order, and I saw a great synopsis in the same style by a guy named Chris Heckert, who I thought did a really great job and can help us remember. So check out the link in the description to the full page. Alright, and here we go.
You wanted the secrets of the island? Well, here they are.
The island in Lost is a mysterious and special place that's extremely difficult to find, as it constantly moves physical locations in the world. The island almost has its own persona and consciousness.
And who brought us here, Jeff? The island.
We're told that the island's been inhabited for thousands of years, and that throughout time, occasionally, people wind up on the island by accident, or they were brought there.
The one who brought your ship to this island.
There's a light at the heart of the island that all men desire due to its power, and it must be protected at all costs because man can't be trusted and would corrupt it.
Because they're people, Jacob, and that's what people do.
Mother is the first known protector of the heart. She kills a woman who just gave birth to twins on the island, raises them as her own, and supernaturally makes it impossible for the boys to kill each other.
I've made it so you can never hurt each other.
She's looking for one of the boys to replace her someday as protector of the island. Mother shows the twins the heart of the island and says that it needs to be protected because humans want the light, as a portion of the light is inside every living thing.
But they always want more.
And that people can't take the light, but if they tried, it could be put out. And if that happened,
it goes out everywhere.
Evil would destroy the world, or at least we're told. Jacob is more reserved, and the man in black is more curious. And sadly, the man in black isn't given a name.
Isn't that just the saddest thing you ever heard?
The man in black discovers people are on the island, and also sees a vision of his real mother, who tells him the truth about Mother, and that he and Jacob aren't from the island. The man in black tells Jacob this, but he decides to believe Mother. But the man in black feels like he doesn't belong and wants to leave, so he joins the other people that are inhabiting the island, and they eventually discover a way to leave the island by harnessing the light. Mother destroys the whole camp and their way to get off, and the man in black kills her in anger. Jacob finds her, and she makes him the new protector of the island, giving him her immense power. Jacob is enraged at his brother and drags him to the heart of the island and throws him in, where Mother once told them that it would be a fate worse than death, and that fate is becoming the smoke monster, leaving behind his human body in the process. After that, the man in black's ultimate goal is to still leave the island, but he can only do that by killing Jacob, which, as we know, Mother prevented them from doing so.
Do you have any idea how badly I want to kill you?
Yes?
One of these days, sooner or later, I'm going to find a loophole, my friend.
Well, when you do, I'll be right here.
Revenge would just be an added bonus for the Man in Black. So for hundreds of years, Jacob influences real-world events to bring people to the island to find a candidate to replace him should his brother find a loophole in the rules and find a way to kill him.
My name is Jacob. I'm the one who brought your ship to this island.
And the Man in Black is trying to find someone in the group that Jacob brings to kill Jacob so he can leave, while also trying to prevent new protectors from living.
You and I can talk all day long about what's right or wrong, but the question before you remains the same. Do you ever want to see your wife again?
Jacob assigns numbers to all the candidates he brings to the island, and he has various methods to look after real-world events to help influence their future arrival to the island. The famous numbers on the show, 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42, refer to Jacob's final 6 candidates, as we see on the cave wall. A quick break just to remind you guys once again that after this video, I'm going to be making unanswered question videos on specific topics, like the numbers. Even though the show explained them as Jacob's numbers assigned to all the candidates he brings to the island, there were still a lot of mysteries about the numbers and a lot of the more supernatural elements of the numbers, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Because I'm not spending like an hour on the numbers in this specific video, I thought I'd give you a little thing about the numbers that you might not know, and it's pretty cool. It's actually something you guys can test out yourself. If you go to Google Maps and type in 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42 as the coordinates, but change the spacing to be 4, 8, 15, 162, 3, 42 instead, the result is actually located near the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean, which is awfully close to where we think Oceanic Flight 815 crashed. And if we zoom in closer to that spot, we can see an actual island really close by. But it actually gets crazier than that. On this tiny island, if we zoom in more, we can actually see a landing strip for a plane. And if we zoom in even more, look what number's on that landing strip. Dude. It's an island called Cosray, and in the mid-1800s, the famous pirate Bully Hayes shipwrecked on that exact island. When did the Black Rock shipwreck on the Lost Island? The mid-1800s as well. Okay, back to the recap. Jacob knows if he were to leave and there was no protector, it would be the end of the world, as the island is figuratively, and even in some cases literally, the cork that holds darkness back.
And it's the only thing keeping the darkness where it belongs.
He also wants to prove that people are good, whereas the Man in Black wants to show that they are all the same. They kill and corrupt. Richard comes to the island in the 1800s on the Black Rock as a slave. The Man in Black tries to coerce him to kill Jacob.
I'm not the one you need to worry about. The devil has your wife. You are going to have to kill him if you ever want to get her back.
But it fails. He becomes Jacob's representative and conduit to the others that are brought to the island, and he's given immortality in the process. As Jacob brings more people to the island through random chance, Richard gathers them and they become known as the natives or the others, basically followers of Jacob. And for the next several decades, they take out people who could be considered dangerous to the island, including the US Army in the 1950s, and with Ben Linus's help, the Dharma Initiative in the 70s. They also make lists on the people that come to the island concerning survivors who could be considered good people, and despite not knowing, also potential candidates to replace Jacob.
I want to know what that paper says.
Different people are picked to lead the others under Richard, including Charles Widmore and Eloise Hawking. Eloise leaves the island due to being pregnant, and Widmore is exiled by Ben, who then becomes a leader, which causes a long-time rivalry between the two. Back to the Dharma Initiative. They arrive on the island in the 1970s and build bases like the Hatch or the Swan Station over pockets of electromagnetic energy to harness the light of the island, a lot like what the Man in Black did 2,000 years ago with his people. I'll get to the Flight 815 crash in a second, but due to this being chronological, the 815 survivors ended up going back in time on the island to the 70s and tried to stop the hatch from being built, as it was the reason they crashed in the first place. However,
there was an incident.
And the 815 survivors were the ones to actually cause the incident to happen, which explained their crash and avoided a paradox.
Say that again?
Flight 815 crashes in 2004 because Desmond doesn't push the button in the hatch that contains the electromagnetic energy that was due to the incident that was caused by the same Flight 815 crash survivors back in the 1970s.
It was really confusing.
Yeah, well, get used to it.
The plane crashes into two sections, the main section and the tail section, and they end up finding each other 48 days later. One of the survivors and main protagonists, John Locke, realizes how special the island is because he can now walk after having been in a wheelchair before coming to the island. A believer in destiny, he sets off to discover all the hidden secrets of the island. He's the first person that we see come face to face with the Man in Black as the smoke monster, who surprisingly lets him live even though he is a candidate for Jacob, and this comes into play later. This whole event invigorates Locke's belief in the island being special and himself being special as well.
Each one of us was brought here for a reason. It's destiny.
One of the other survivors, Boone, gets killed along the way as he and Locke discover a hatch buried in the ground. This causes Jack, the other main protagonist and Locke's antagonist, at least for most of the series, to be at odds, splitting up the group several times. Jack, the man of science, wants to leave, and Locke, the man of faith, wants to stay.
You're not supposed to go home.
What am I supposed to do?
They go to Richard's old ship, the Black Rock, find dynamite, and use it to blow up the hatch.
And boom goes the dynamite.
They find Desmond in there, who convinces them to push a button every 108 minutes to save the world. Jack doesn't believe it.
And you push a button on faith alone. Nothing is going to happen.
And Locke does believe it.
Why do you find it so hard to believe? Why do you find it so easy? It's never been easy.
It's a leap of faith, Jack.
Ben Linus, the guy who helped Richard and the others 3 decades ago take out his own people, the Dharma Initiative, infiltrates the 815 survivors to spy and learn about them, and more specifically about Locke, knowing he's special, probably a candidate, and potential to threaten his leadership, so he tries to undermine him. Locke eventually discovers the others' camp where Richard makes him leader, and he tells him about Jacob. And it's a little confusing with all the time travel and time flashes that are coming up, but I'll explain in just a little bit why Richard made Locke the leader. Ben's jealous at the attention Locke's getting, so he takes him to Jacob's cabin.
We're here.
He does it to put on a show, thinking no one's gonna be there, and pretends to talk to Jacob.
You can't see him?
See who?
Jacob. He's sitting right here. Yes, I know, but he insisted.
You're pathetic.
And I'm sorry that you're too limited to see.
He did that to destroy Locke's self-belief that he was special because it was a threat to Ben's power. Ben didn't expect the cabin to not be empty.
Help me.
What did you just say?
I didn't say anything.
The ash circle keeping the man in black out was broken. He entered the cabin before they got there, pretended to be Jacob, and once again tried to find his loophole by manipulating Jacob's recruits into a long con of eventually killing Jacob. And this part's really important because the man in black convinces Ben that he is actually the limited one by only allowing Locke to hear him, fueling Ben's jealousy and his resentment towards Jacob, since that's who they think Locke is hearing from. Ben thought he was pulling the strings, but he in fact was the puppet, and this starts the chain of events that leads to the end. Ben doesn't want to be played as a fool, so he acts like he knows what's happening.
What was that?
That was Jacob.
Jack, Kate, and Sawyer are captured by the others but eventually escape. Despite Jack being exposed to really strange things like seeing his dead father walk on the island, among other things, he still doesn't believe the island is special and is dead set on leaving, while Locke knows how special it is, wants to stay, and tries to prevent Jack and the rest from leaving or communicating with the outside world by any means necessary. Back in the hatch, Desmond and Locke try to test if the Swan hatch button is all a hoax, but when they realize it's not,
I'll see you in another life, brother.
Desmond turns its failsafe key to prevent total destruction, causing an implosion that gives him premonitions and sends his consciousness through time, where he meets Eloise Hawking, who guides him on his path. Eventually, Charles Widmore pays a team of mercenaries and scientists to come to the island to hunt for Ben. One of the scientists is Daniel Faraday, son of Eloise Hawking, who's sent there by his mom because she knew he needed to fulfill the time arc of having Richard bury the hydrogen bomb in 1954 and then blow it up in 1980 to cause the incident. This causes everything to happen the way it was supposed to happen, the self-fulfilling prophecy.
I think I crashed your plane.
With Daniel working with Desmond's time-traveling consciousness to make sure different important events happen throughout time.
Each time your consciousness jumps, it gets harder and harder to jump back.
Confusing, I know, right?
Well, duh.
Ben eventually has the leader of the mercenaries killed, which causes a bomb to go off on their ship, right after Jack, Kate, Son, Hurley, Saeed, and Aaron escape the helicopter. A little bit before this, Locke had been told by the man in black disguised as Christian Shepherd, once again in Jacob's cabin, to move the island to protect it. Ben decided to take it upon himself to do it.
I hope you're happy now, Jacob.
Utilizing the wheel that the man in black had built so many centuries before, transporting him to Tunisia. This not only moves the island's physical location, but moves it through time as well.
Because once Ben turned that wheel, time isn't a straight line for us anymore.
Allowing all the previous events I talked about to occur.
What is important, Desmond, is what I'm about to say to you. I need you to listen.
And causes random time flashes for the survivors still on the island, going forward and backwards in time.
Think of the island like a record, spinning on a turntable. Only now, that record is skipping. What?
During the time that Jack and the crew are flying back to the island, it disappears because of Ben moving the island, and they crash, but they're rescued by Penny's boat, and they go back to the mainland and become known as the Oceanic Six. And back to the island, it flashes to the past where Locke meets Richard, and Locke tells them that he, Locke is their leader and that they've met before and they'll meet again. For Richard, this is his first time meeting Locke.
And why don't I remember, any of this?
Because it hasn't happened yet.
The island keeps skipping and flashing through time, which causes Richard to believe that Locke is special since he's been there and seen him now in different time periods. Locke has to stop the time flashes, so he turns the wheel himself, transporting him off the island, where he meets up with the Oceanic Six to try and convince them to come back to the island.
You have to help me. You're supposed to help me. John, it's over.
Because the man in black disguised as Christian Shepherd convinced him he had to, even though he thought it was directed from Jacob, thinking it was the only way for him to get back and protect the island. And little did he know, he and Ben were being used as pawns by the man in black this whole time. A group of the survivors back on the island had their final flash end up in the 70s, where they actually joined the Dharma Initiative like I talked about earlier, and that way they wouldn't be considered hostiles and killed.
It's 1977. We're in the Dharma Initiative. What?
It lasts for 3 years, so while the Oceanic Six are living in America from 2004 to 2007, the Dharma Losties are living in 1977 to 1980, 1980 being the year of the incident, which again is the event that ultimately links to their plane's crash from the hatch because it released all the electromagnetism that the hatch helped suppress by pressing the button every 108 minutes, and by not pressing that button, the plane ended up crashing, with them landing on the island.
Hadn't thought of that.
On the mainland, Ben ends up killing Locke, largely due to jealousy, and also due to he himself being a pawn in Jacob and the Man in Black's 2,000-year-old rivalry. Locke's death was probably the saddest for me, especially this last watch through, because he died thinking that everything he believed in was wrong. It really makes his death the most tragic of all because he truly believed that he was special, and that the island was worth protecting. It turns out in the end that he was right about everything the entire time, but he died thinking that he was wrong. And a really quick side note about Locke's death that I don't think I mentioned in my previous videos. Remember the iconic scene of Locke smiling at Kate with an orange in his mouth in the first episode of Lost? If anyone's seen The Godfather, you know most of the characters that die in that trilogy do so after an interaction with an orange. It's just a foreshadowing technique in those movies. I thought that scene stuck out in such a weird way before, but with all the references to other stories and movies in Lost, I think to me it shows that they were foreshadowing Locke's death from the very beginning, and that it was important enough to show that specific scene. Even though they were basically showing us what was going to happen, it took me a while to catch that. Does anyone else think that's the case? Okay, back to the recap.
Well, do your job.
Jack feels guilty because he hears Locke's death as a suicide and thinks he was the one that caused that, especially when he receives Locke's suicide note that says, "I wish you believed me." This causes a chain of events that makes him realize how special the island was and causes him to want to go back.
We're not supposed to leave.
We have to go back!
He convinces the rest of them to do so as well, where they meet Eloise Hawking, who tells them exactly how to get back, that they have to recreate the same crash as before, essentially. So instead of Jack's dad, Christian, being the dead body, they use Locke's dead body. Frank flies the plane this time when he was supposed to be the one flying it last time. Instead of Kate being in handcuffs, it's Saeed, and many other similarities. They land the plane safely on the island this time, and Jack feels like it's his destiny now to save all the people he left behind, while also realizing exactly how important the island is. When Locke's dead body finally arrives on the island, the Man in Black takes over Locke's form, since it's been established through all the time jumps that Locke is the leader sent by Jacob, causing the Men in Black to now be in charge of Jacob's people, aka the others, without them even realizing.
Something different about you.
I know the summary's been long, but it's really important to know that he has helped shape and manipulate so many of these events behind the scenes.
Did you meet a man in the jungle dressed in black?
He can be very convincing.
Just as Jacob has, in order for him to find his loophole to finally leave the island.
You're going to need to tell him that he has to bring everyone who left back to the island. And when he asks how to do that, you tell him he's going to have to die.
Who is that man, John?
Me.
You're gonna have to die, John.
Richard said I was going to die.
Well, I suppose that's why they call it sacrifice.
I'm ready.
Now back to the Man in Black. He demands to see Jacob, so Richard takes him to Jacob's home. When Ben sees Locke living, he gets scared because he's never seen anyone resurrected on the island before. He still thinks that fake Locke is actually real Locke, and so he's infuriated and jealous that Jacob would talk to Locke.
Well, you found your loophole.
Have you met before?
When Ben himself has devoted his whole life to the island, even essentially sacrificing his own daughter in the name of Jacob, Ben has been manipulated this whole time by the Man in Black to do the one thing he couldn't do, kill his brother Jacob, leaving the island with no protector. Now, the Man in Black is free to leave the island only after he's killed all the remaining candidates Jacob originally brought to the island. They can either all come with him off the island, or they all have to die, even if just one refuses to leave. It's because of the ancient rules set in place.
You were only able to come back to this island because you all did it together. If we're going to get on that plane and leave, it has to happen the same way.
However, the remaining candidates learn about the true nature of the Man in Black from Jacob's people, who also came to the island on their flight.
Locke can't kill us. This is what he wanted. This is what he's been waiting for. Everything that he has done has been to get us here. Locke said that he can't leave the island without us. I think that he can't leave the island unless we're all dead. He told me that he could kill any one of us whenever he wanted. So what if he hasn't because he's not allowed to? What if he's trying to get us to kill each other?
At the same time, Charles Widmore ultimately comes back to the island by submarine and brings Desmond with him, who's instrumental in the outcome of events.
You're the only person who can help us because, Desmond, rules don't apply to you. You're special. You're uniquely and miraculously special.
What are you talking about?
Widmore shows that Desmond's uniquely able to be exposed to electromagnetism, and while he's being zapped during this time of unconsciousness, he flashes to a timeline where Oceanic 815 doesn't crash. This is what's known as the flash sideways. Throughout the whole series, there's been flashbacks from before the crash, flash forwards from when the Oceanic 6 come back to the mainland, and during season 6, the flash sideways, a parallel timeline where things seemingly are similar yet different, and the main characters are living out alternate scenarios. They don't crash on the island, which is buried deep under the ocean. Jack has a son with Juliet, Sawyer is a cop instead of a convict, Jin and Sun are secret lovers, and Locke is back in a wheelchair, but meets Jack, who thinks he can fix him through surgery. There's also a really interesting note here that plays a big role in the last episode. Whenever there's a flashback, a flash forward, or even a sideways transition in season 6, we hear this sound effect.
He's hurt. John, can you hear me?
But while Desmond's being hit with electromagnetism and transitions to the flash sideways, there's no sound effect. The same thing happened in my opinion, the best episode of the series, The Constant, when his consciousness flashes back and forward through time without the sound effect.
I'm not supposed to be here. 20! 21!
This signifies that his consciousness was actually in the flash sideways at that time, and not just a normal character arc of seeing what happens before or after. In the flash sideways timeline, Desmond works for Charles Widmore, meets up with Charlie, who's supposed to play at a concert that night, but claims he had visions of a girl who we know as Claire, and describes an overwhelming feeling of love at first sight. At the very, very end of this video, I actually have that quote. While driving away, Charlie grabs the wheel and crashes them into the water, and Desmond saves him, but he has a vision of Charlie drowning on the island, even though that didn't happen in this timeline. Charlie says he did it to show Desmond something. Desmond asks who Penny is, and Charlie says to look for her and that none of this matters. Desmond has to explain to Widmore and Eloise Hawking why he lost their guitarist for the concert that night, and sees Penny's name on a list, but Eloise tells him cryptically to stop looking for her, that he's not ready yet.
That was weird, right?
He meets Daniel, who's just a musician in this timeline and not a mathematician, and Daniel explains weird events that have happened to him, seemingly from another life, and feels like they had already known each other before they even met.
What if all this, what if this wasn't supposed to be our life?
Desmond ultimately finds Penny, they meet and shake hands. When Desmond opens his eyes and is back with Widmore in the real timeline, Widmore says it's only been a few seconds that he's been out, even though to Desmond it feels like several hours or even days. And Widmore explains that Desmond's vital for the events to come. Desmond becomes cooperative and now seems to know what needs to be done. He now knows what the flash sideways truly is, as we find out at the very end. After that, Desmond finds the other losties in the flash sideways and influences events to get them to meet their constants to remember.
Every equation needs stability, something known. It's called a constant.
A constant being someone or something that you truly care about.
Something familiar in both times.
Who keeps you sane and balanced and alive through any timeline.
Call him that bloody constant.
It's one of the most prominent concepts of the whole show, as I'll talk about at the very end of this recap. Desmond takes his car and purposely runs over wheelchair-bound Locke, who ends up in surgery under Jack, and then Desmond gets Saeed and Kate out of jail, telling Kate that they're going to a concert. He's basically influencing events in the Flash Sideways timeline. Back to the real timeline, the Man in Black starts killing off the remaining survivors one by one.
We're gonna need to deal with the rest of the passengers from the Ajira flight that brought me here.
What do you mean do it?
You know what I mean.
Jacob in spirit form comes back and talks talks to the remaining candidates, helping to guide them in the right direction. He tells Jack about the location of the light and makes him the new protector of the island, and tells him he has to protect the light for as long as he can. The smoke monster ends up killing most of Widmore's team. Widmore meets up with some of the Losties and explains Jacob himself personally invited him back to the island, and that they need to destroy the Ajira airplane so that the Man in Black can't leave the island. The Man in Black finds Ben, who gives up Widmore's location after being promised that he would have the island for himself and be leader.
Because once I leave this island, you can have it all to yourself.
They find Widmore, and the Man in Black forces him to give up information that Desmond was brought to the island because of his resistance to electromagnetism. As Widmore starts whispering more information to the Man in Black, Ben shoots and kills him. They then find Desmond and throw him down a well, the same one that the Man in Black's people built ages ago. Lassie, Vincent, along with Rose and Bernard, helps lead Desmond's rescue.
Starring... Vincent! What is it, girl? Is it Desmond?
Here, I don't figure to hold this rope all day.
All right, pull him out.
Good girl, that's it.
The Man in Black tells Ben that when he finds Desmond, he's not going to kill him. He's going to use him to destroy the island. And he says that what Widmore whispered to him was that Desmond was Jacob's last resort to be used if all the other candidates died. And that, my dear friends, is where we left off right before the final episode. I know it was a little long, but because it's been over 10 years since we last visited Lost together,
I know.
I felt like it was necessary, and hopefully that helped get you guys caught up if you haven't seen Lost in a while. Now on to the final episode, and like all my other recaps, this is a combination of my own thoughts and ideas, interesting theories from the Lost community, and resources like Lostpedia, which is amazing, by the way. It's essentially the Lost Bible. It's used a lot in this video. All the sources I use and mention are linked in the description below, so make sure after this recap you go and check it out, because there's some really great information out there that I won't be able to cover in this video, as I'm pretty sure this video is going to be feature film length.
I want some friggin' answers!
The final episode of Lost was the 17th episode of season 6, simply titled The End, and it made its debut on May 23rd,
2.3.
Just press 2-3.
Flip 23.
2010. And exactly 10 years later to the date is when I announced this video is coming.
I'm supposed to do this, damn it!
And an interesting thing is that they actually specifically made this episode come out on the 23rd, which was a Sunday when normally episodes came out on Tuesdays, which meant that there was only 5 days between the previous episode and this episode. The episode starts out with a montage going from normal timeline to flash sideways timeline and back. Christian Shepherd's coffin arrives at LAX, unlike in the normal timeline. Jack looks at x-rays and washes his hands in the river. Ben makes tea in the flash sideways, then does the opposite in the normal timeline of loading a gun, while Fake Locke, aka the Man in Black, gets rope ready, which I thought was a nice touch because the last time real Locke was around Ben was using a rope to strangle him to death. In the sideways, Locke gets ready for his surgery to be able to walk again, and the coffin's delivered to Eloise's church, where Desmond signs for the body from a man named Arnie Böcklin, who could be named after a Swiss painter that was obsessed with death named Arnold Böcklin, known for his painting Isle of the Dead. Island of the Dead, I wonder what that could be referencing. Then, Arnie and Desmond unload the coffin from the truck and carry it away. Desmond goes back to the car and tells Kate the body belonged to a man named Christian Shepherd.
Christian Shepherd? Seriously?
She asks why he broke her out of prison, why they need to go to some concert so badly, and Desmond cryptically says no one can tell you why you're here, in this place. He introduces himself and says that he's a friend.
And as for what I want to leave.
Leave and go where?
Let me show you.
We flash to the island where Sawyer asks Jack if he feels any different now that Jacob made him the new protector of the island last episode. Jack says not really.
How about you come down off the mountaintop and tell us what the hell the burning bush had to say for itself?
Jack then tells Kate, Sawyer, and Hurley about the heart of the island, that it's a light that the Man in Black wants to put out, and that if it's put out...
And that's it for all of us.
By the way, throughout this recap, just because I'm going to be referring to his name several times in different ways, whenever I say Locke, or Fake Locke, or the Man in Black, or the Smoke Monster, they're all referring to the same person in the island timeline. It's the Man in Black, who is the Smoke Monster masquerading as John Locke. I'm adding this part just to prevent any confusion. But in the flash sideways though, Locke is the real John Locke. Sawyer informs the group that he thinks Fake Locke hasn't put it out because he needs Desmond, knowing that he put him in the well. Sawyer tells them to go ahead to the heart.
And I'll go get the magic leprechaun out of that well.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Back to the flash sideways, Hurley takes Saeed to the Flightline Motel and shows him a tranquilizer gun, hoping it might jog his memory of their timeline together in the flash forward. earlier in season 6, Hurley's the first one that Desmond gets through to remember the normal timeline. If you remember, we've actually seen the Flightline Motel a couple times before. It was in Locke's flashback where he was supposed to meet his father, and it was in Kate's flashback where she tells the desk clerk that she's expecting a letter. And a little random bit of trivia here, the dog that's being walked across in the scene in the background is actually Lost director Jack Bender's dog Lulu, who's actually already been in a lot of episodes. Hurley goes up to Charlie's room with a big grin, remembering his buddy from the island.
Maybe we can still be friends. Our story doesn't have to end. I'm sorry we got out in such a hurry. We went to the bar, but it was worth it. Maybe we can still be friends.
Catch up with you later. Just remember I love you, man.
Drunk Charlie tells him to go away, that he doesn't want to play in the concert, thinking Hurley is just one of Widmore's cronies. After Charlie refuses, Hurley shoots him in the back with a tranquilizer gun, then throws him in the back of the car.
What was that? That was Charlie.
Back to the island, Kate asks Jack why he took the job as Island's protector, which I think is really cool to see Jack's transformation from skeptic to believer, finally embracing his inner Locke, and it's way different than when he was on the island the first time.
It's an island, John. No one needs to protect it.
You're not supposed to go home.
What am I supposed to do?
Jack says that the island's all he has left, the only thing he hasn't ruined, and Kate tells him that he hasn't ruined anything, that nothing's irreversible.
This would be so sweet if you weren't all about to die.
We go to Sawyer, who's spying on the Man in Black, but gets caught by a wannabe badass Ben. I remember reading a YouTube comment years ago that I thought was funny, and it said, Locke was a badass until he met Ben, and Ben was a badass until he met fake Locke. Which is true, and that's what we all thought too. Sawyer tells Locke that he came to get Desmond, but it looks like someone already saved him. Then, wait for it, delivers the pun.
Oh well.
Sawyer says he's guessing Locke wants Desmond to destroy the island, who tells him that's indeed the plan and that all of Jacob's little candidates are going to be killed. Locke looks surprised when Sawyer informs him that they aren't candidates anymore. Sawyer escapes by stealing Ben's rifle after elbowing him in the face, who at some point has got to start looking like a retired boxer.
What you need?
Out of here safely.
Ben thought Locke was speaking figuratively when he said he wants to destroy the island, to which Locke informs him that he wants to sink the island and offers him a place on his boat. Then he notices Vincent's footprints.
I think there was a dog here.
We go to Rose and Bernard's cabin where Desmond wakes up and learns from Rose that her and Bernard have been living there since the time flashes happened, and they don't know what year it is anymore. They were able to escape from the flaming arrow attack from the others when the others thought that they were a part of the US Army. They don't want to get involved in the drama of the island anymore, and she asks him to leave after breakfast. She specifically says, "move on," which foreshadows a phrase we'll hear at the very end of the episode. But Big Bad Locke comes in and threatens to kill Rose and Bernard if Desmond doesn't come with him and do what he wants. Desmond eventually says he'll do what Locke wants.
Yes, Desmond, you will.
And I have to say, watching the series back after it's been a few years, and especially the last few episodes, I forgot just how incredible of an actor Terry O'Quinn was as Locke. And not just Locke, but especially the Man in Black. And going from a youthful curiosity to kind of like an ardent wonder, to this ancient disgust and deep-seated loathing while trying to hide it. I really love that hateful face he makes so often as the Man in Black, just after smiling.
Who are you? You sure as hell ain't John Locke.
What makes you say that?
Because Locke was scared. Even when he was pretending he wasn't. But you ain't scared.
And Michael Emerson as well was just spectacular as Ben.
Because he's the only one that'll have me.
I thought in a cast of really incredible actors, those two stood out among the rest. And I'm curious, which actors stood out to you guys the most and which ones were your favorites? This is also the last scene we ever see of Rose and Bernard on the island, ending, in my opinion, the best love story on Lost. And real quick, my top 5 couples in Lost, in order, are probably Rose and Bernard 1, Desmond and Penny right after that, Jin and Sun, Charlie and Claire, and then probably Sawyer and Juliet. And I'm curious, what's your list for best Lost couple? When Locke asks where Desmond thinks he's being taken, Desmond says he has a hunch that they're going to a place with a bright light that once again confuses Locke as to how Desmond and Sawyer know so much. To me, this signifies that Desmond knows about both timelines and what's going on in both of them. An interesting note about Desmond here, the actor who played him, Henry Ian Cusick, said on the Geronimo Jack's Beard podcast that he put a rock in his shoe every time he needed to limp. Pretty sure there's a rock in his shoe in this scene. Okay, back to the story. We hear a noise in the background, and Ben hides a walkie-talkie from the Man in Black as Miles tries to call him. Locke wonders what the sound is. A funny note, the editors use the exact same shot of Locke looking surprised within 5 seconds of each other, when Desmond guesses about the bright light, and then when the walkie-talkie sound goes off. Miles finds Richard, who wakes up and asks Miles where Locke is.
You thought it'd be a good idea to talk to the Black Smoke. They responded by throwing you into the damn jungle.
Richard says they need to go to Hydra Island and use the dynamite they have to blow up the plane to prevent the Man in Black from leaving the island. Back to the sideways timeline. Miles, who's Sawyer's cop partner in that timeline, calls Sawyer and tells him he just saw Saeed, who must have escaped. Remember, they thought he was in jail. Miles asks Sawyer to check on Sun at the hospital, as she was the only survivor of Saeed's recent gunfight. So we go to the St. Sebastian Hospital, where Jin's with Sun at her bedside. Juliet comes in to do an ultrasound on their unborn baby, and the moment the ultrasound happens, Sun regains all her memories of the normal timeline, especially of Juliet doing the exact same ultrasound on her on the island. Jin, seeing the ultrasound, has his own flashes of his time on the island, and all the memories flash back in a super emotional montage. Their baby, Ji-yeon, was their constant. I also thought it was cool how before the flashes, they didn't know a lick of English, they only knew Korean, but then after they had their flashes and remembered, they spoke perfectly fluent English like they knew at the end of the normal timeline.
And for the record, you do speak English just fine.
In the normal timeline, Sawyer catches up to Jack, Kate, and Hurley.
Whoa! Easy, Bigfoot. It's just me.
Sawyer confirms that Jack's right, that the Man in Black wants to destroy the island, and that they need to find Desmond before he does. But Jack says that they're all going to the same place anyway, so it doesn't matter, and that once they get there...
Then it ends.
In the flash sideways, Jack and Locke talk before Locke's about to go into surgery, and Jack jokes with him saying that he could kill him, maybe foreshadowing something else on the island timeline, but is confident that he'll be successful, and says,
I'll see you on the other side.
The phrase, see you on the other side, is foreshadowing what happens at the end of the episode, but it's also a phrase that's been used a ton of times in Lost. And if there's one thing we know about the show, it's that if one phrase is repeated over and over again, it's really important.
See you on the other side, son.
See you on the other side.
Well, see you on the other side.
Back to the island, Miles and Richard are boarding a canoe when Miles notices Richard's first gray hair. Richard smiles and says he realizes now that he actually wants to live.
It's good timing.
Because I want to live.
Remember, before this, it seems like Richard lost his immortality after Jacob died, who was the one who gave him immortality. As they're paddling to Hydra Island, they come across debris from the bombing of Widmore's submarine when they find Frank, who's alive. This is from the same submarine where Jin and Sun just recently died.
당신하고 같이 있을게. 다시는 떠나지 않을 거야. It's a very sad image.
They tell Frank about their plan to blow up the plane to prevent the smoke monster, aka the Man in Black, from leaving, when Frank tells them that they should just use it to leave the island instead.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm a pilot.
We then go to the two groups on the island as they run into each other on their way to the heart. Kate immediately grabs Sawyer's gun and shoots at the Man in Black, who's unaffected by the bullets.
That's impossible. Even if it is, let's say it's not.
Locke walks up to Jack and says,
So it's you.
Yeah, it's me.
Jacob being who he is, I expected to be a little more surprised. You're sort of the obvious choice.
Jack says he volunteered for the job of protector and knows he can't stop the Man in Black, saying he wants to go with him to the heart of the island. Locke thinks that Jack's confused, but Jack says that he's now sworn to protect the island and that Locke thinks he's going to destroy the island, but that it's not going to happen.
I'm gonna kill you.
Locke asks him how he's going to do that, and Jack responds by saying it'll be a surprise.
Okay, let's get on with it.
We go back to the hospital in the flash sideways, where Jack gives the tickets to the concert that night to his ex-wife Juliet. She then gives them to their son David, and Jack suggests taking his sister, David's Aunt Claire. As Juliet and David leave, Sawyer walks by to check on Sun. On the island, as the merged group treks onward toward the heart of the island, Sawyer asks Jack how he plans to kill the Man in Black, and Jack tells him Desmond, but he's not sure just how yet. Jack says he can't believe that Jacob would bring Desmond all the way back to the island just to be used as bait, and that what he really is a weapon.
It's a hell of a long con, Doc.
They reach the bamboo grove near the heart, where the very first shot of Lost takes place, and Locke tells them that only Jack and Desmond should continue on. Hurley waddles over to Jack and says he believes in him, as the Man in Black notices that a bad storm is coming. Remember the storm comment because I'm going to come back to it when I'm talking about Egyptian mythology later on. And then they see it, the heart of the island. And to me, it seemed noticeably less brighter than when we saw it the first time 2,000 years ago. Locke ties a rope to a tree as Jack tied the other end around Desmond. Desmond tells Jack that killing Locke and destroying the island, it doesn't matter.
You're gonna lower me into that light, and I'm gonna go somewhere else.
Because as we saw before, it was the Flash Sideways timeline. Desmond tells him it's a place they can all be with their loved ones and that Jack is there also, currently. He talks about how in that timeline, they were on Flight 815 and it never crashed, and that they sat next to each other. Even though Jack is the new Jacob, he's still a man of science, and he informs Desmond that he already tried that, which refers back to the incident, and that there aren't any shortcuts, that all of this matters. They enter the cave, and they see the light below. Back in the Flash Sideways, Hurley and Saeed sit outside a bar, and Hurley tells Saeed that he can't tell him what's going on, that there are rules.
Don't worry about it. Just trust me, okay?
Okay, random stranger.
Come on, son. Rule number 1, never trust anybody.
A fight breaks out by the bar, and then a woman is pushed to the ground, so Saeed rushes to help, beats up the man, and helps her up. It's Shannon, and when they touch, they both gain all their memories back of the island timeline. They were each other's constants. Boone comes up to the car, and it turns out that the whole fight was set up by Hurley and Boone so that Saeed and Shannon could remember again. In the normal timeline, Ben gets a call from Miles who says that they just got to Hydra Island. Ben begs them not to blow up the plane, and Miles says that they're not. They're gonna fly it off the island, and for Ben's group to get there ASAP. Meanwhile, crazy-looking Claire emerges from the bushes with a rifle, thinking that they were sent there by Locke to kill her. Kate hears this on the walkie-talkie. Richard pleads with Claire to believe them, that all they're trying to do is escape the Man in Black, get as far away from him as possible, go home, and begs her to join them.
No.
Inside the heart of the island, Desmond states that he knows what to do when he gets lowered down, to go where the light is brightest. As they're lowering Desmond down, the Man in Black reminisces how this experience is similar to when Locke and Jack found Desmond deep in the hatch. Jack snaps back with one of my favorite lines of the whole series, that the Man in Black is not John Locke, and that he disrespects Locke's memory by wearing his face, and that he's nothing like him.
Turns out he was right about most everything. I just wish I could have told him that while he was still alive.
The reason I like this line so much is that finally, after 120 episodes, that Locke's faith of the island being special and worthy of being protected was correct and warranted. And to me, watching through the whole series multiple times, Jack's character arc and storyline was one of my favorites because of how transformative it was. He really becomes Locke at the end, finally believing Locke, which was literally Locke's dying wish.
It's John Locke's suicide note.
The Man in Black then snaps back at Jack and says that Locke wasn't right about anything, and then Jack will realize that once the island starts to sink in the ocean. Jack retorts back that they'll just have to see which one of them is right. Once Desmond is down, Jack and Locke look down below and the camera pulls away, which reminds me a lot of the shot that the Man in Black just talked about, where Locke and Jack are looking down into the hatch at the end of season 1. Okay, back to the Sideways. Juliet's paged by the hospital, so she has to leave David and Claire. We go inside the band room where Charlie's passed out drunk again, and Charlotte wakes him up.
I was shot by a fat man.
Daniel, who's also playing in the concert, is also in the room and introduces himself to Charlotte. Clearly in love, but no memories flash when they touch. Remember, just days earlier, Daniel saw her in a museum, feeling as if he already knew her, causing him to write out mathematical equations that he didn't understand, as he's just a musician in this timeline, but he would have understood in the normal timeline. Claire and David make their way over to table number 23, of course, where Desmond greets them. Lots of references to 23 in this episode, because as we know, that's the candidate number assigned to Jack.
That'd be Jack Shepherd.
And even though this isn't a pure Jack-centric episode, it pretty much is. Kate and Claire recognize each other from when Kate helped her a few days earlier. Miles' father, Pierre Chang, introduces Daniel and Driveshaft, and as they start playing, Charlie notices Claire in the audience and is stunned. Remember what he told Desmond a few episodes ago about his vision of Claire.
And I know her. We're together. It's like we've always been and always will be. This feeling, this love.
Claire has a contraction and leaves, with Kate following her. Desmond is down inside the heart of the island in the normal timeline when he notices skeletons lining the entranceway. This could be people that tried to take the heart throughout the ages, like Mother warned Jacob and the Man in Black about.
They come, fight, they destroy, they corrupt, and it always ends the same.
Desmond finds the heart, which is a radiant pool of water and light, with a large stone in the middle that acts as a plug, a cork, preventing the water from draining. Remember, Jacob's used the cork analogy a few times, especially to Richard with the wine bottle.
Think of this wine as what you keep calling hell. There's many other names for it too. Malevolence, evil, darkness. And here it is, swirling around in the bottle, unable to get out, because if it did, it would spread. The cork is this island. And it's the only thing keeping the darkness where it belongs.
And the man in black shatters that bottle, foreshadowing what he wants to do here with the island. It also looks like a bigger version of the sinkhole in Ben's house that he drains in order to summon the smoke monster, aka the man in black.
Oh, gross.
Desmond steps into the pool of light and is immediately zapped by electromagnetism, something that would kill anyone else immediately. He screams in pain and his nose bleeds, like it does when he flashes through time in earlier episodes, but he still goes up to the stone cork and removes it from the hole. This causes the water to drain from the pool and stop flowing from the pipes. The audio almost sounds like a machine's being turned off. The light goes completely out. After the pool is dry, a fiery glow, almost hell-like, starts emerging from the open hole with steam almost like an erupting volcano. On a side note, the producers told Entertainment Weekly that they actually wanted the final showdown to be in a real volcano.
How about that?
Pretty weird, huh?
Especially filming in Hawaii, which is land of the volcanoes. But because of the massive budget it would take, and they already spent most of their budget on the temple scenes, they ultimately decided against that, and maybe this is paying homage to that idea. The producers said that the premise of the volcano was that it actually formed the smoke monster, and that the final battle scene would be kind of like a Mount Doom scene where magma's flying everywhere. But then they also had the idea that it would look too much like Revenge of the Sith, and that anything they did with their budget would look so fake compared to the massive Star Wars budget. We actually saw references to a volcano back in season 3 with drawings and images and even a model of it in one of the Dharma labs.
We will get our very own volcanic reaction.
Is that what happened to the volcano on this island?
Exactly, but that was a long time ago.
They say this was supposed to foreshadow the end, but it never amounted to anything because back in season 3 they were actually planning on using a volcano. Once the pool gets dry, Desmond wails. Thinking it didn't work, Locke turns to Jack and says, "It looks like you were wrong," and leaves. Let's pause here for a second and go back a bit and analyze what we just saw happen. As we know from many times before, the island's been inhabited for thousands of years by many different groups of people. There's been Egyptians and Romans, which Jacob and the Man in Black actually are, and it goes even as far back as ancient Sumerians. We've seen a lot of examples of ancient languages used all over the island throughout the series. Now look at this. This is super interesting.
You gonna tell me?
When we zoom in on the stone cork, we can see that it also has markings. There's a little bit cleaner view of this stone a little bit later in the episode, so I'll just use that for now while I'm talking about this. According to the Lost Encyclopedia, the top 2 lines of this are Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the bottom 2 lines are cuneiform script, which was used by ancient Sumerians in Mesopotamia even before the Egyptians, and one of the earliest forms of human writing. Locke, back in episode 2, talks with Walt about the Mesopotamians when it comes to backgammon.
Backgammon's the oldest game in the world. Archaeologists found sets when they excavated the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia.
It was a symbol of the show, dark and light, representing the Man in Black and Jacob, as they themselves also played it throughout the ages. So here's what the cork translates to. Embrace that which the balance hath weighted. Let a path be made for the Osiris in the great valley, and let the Osiris have light to guide him on his way. He hath reconciled the 2 fighters, Horus and Set, the guardians of life. Break the immovable yoke that we may sleep, that silence may reign and we may sleep. Before we talk about what it means, first a quick description of the names it mentions. Osiris was one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. His brother, Set, was the Egyptian god of war, chaos, and storms. Horus is the son of Osiris and a candidate to replace him as leader. Set kills his brother Osiris through trickery and manipulation, and Horus then becomes Set's main rival. But his reign of terror was over when Horus killed Set, and Horus ended up the main god. Any of that sound familiar? To me, this perfectly describes the current situation in Lost. Jacob represents Osiris, the leader and the main god. The Man in Black is Set, god of chaos and storms, which, remember a little bit ago, I told you to remember that comment that the Man in Black made about a big storm coming, almost like he brought it there.
Hey, why would he do that?
The Man in Black kills Jacob through trickery and manipulation, just like Set. And Jack, even though he's not Jacob's son, he's still a candidate to replace Jacob, like Horus was to Osiris. Jack ends up confronting the Man in Black, aka Set, and we'll see if the same thing happens as it did in Egyptian mythology. Also, Ta'aret is one of Set's concubines, and as we know, we see a huge statue built for her on the island. Another interesting note about the Man in Black and Set's connection is that Set's most powerful form was described as a giant black dog. And remember the name that the Dharma Initiative gave to the black smoke. They called it Cerberus, which in Greek mythology is a three-headed black dog. On the cork, the top two lines are Egyptian, and it talks about two fighters, both being guardians of life, and also talks about a light that brings balance. And it seems obvious to me, but that's talking about Jacob and the Man in Black and the need for a protector to guard the source of life.
How do you know about that?
The only problem is that Jacob and the Man in Black came to the island thousands of years after the Egyptians were there, at least as far as we know.
Ha! Then your theory is wrong.
This means that the cork is probably not talking about the twins, but other much older protectors far in the past, who the ancient races understandably thought were gods, as they had immeasurable power. However, since we know the island timeline veers a little bit differently than normal historical timeline, ancient Egyptians could have survived and their cultures could have survived much longer on the island than in normal history.
I didn't ask you when, I asked you how.
And if that's the case and they were around when Jacob and the Man in Black were in power, they probably revered them as gods. Remember, as we saw in the temple, ancient races viewed the Man in Black as Anubis. The Man in Black could have tricked ancient Egyptians into eliminating the light, and it started happening, but once they realized it, they built this cork to prevent the remaining light from going out completely. And if they ever do a reboot of Lost, I think it'd be really cool to address some of these ancient races and lore of the island. The bottom two lines of the cork are in ancient cuneiform, and they actually talk about the stone cork itself, referring to it as an immovable object, which is probably because of the electromagnetism in the pool surrounding it. And it seems like whoever's writing this specific line on the cork can finally be at rest if the cork is removed from the hole, which doesn't really make sense, because then why would they make the cork in the first place?
I misspoke. What I meant to say is...
So instead of it being a person, I think when it says essentially, remove the cork so we may sleep and silence may reign, we is referring to the island, possibly a collective of consciousness. And like I said at the very beginning of the series recap, the island has its own persona. So removing the cork will sink the island, and it will be able to rest on the ocean floor in silence. One big question that arises from all of this is, was the cork there centuries ago when Jacob threw the Man in Black into the heart of the island and the source? Well, according to Carlton Cuse from the DVD audio commentary from the episode Across the Sea, it would be an incredibly likely deduction that people built the stone cork after the Man in Black was thrown in there and became the smoke monster. This could also explain why the light was so much brighter the first time we saw it. But then we see that if there's no stone cork, as we see when Desmond pulls it out of the hole, then it seems like the light goes away, so that part's a little confusing. It also doesn't explain why the ancient writings on the cork are in Egyptian and cuneiform if it was made after the Man in Black was thrown in there, who was born a few thousand years after those races. There's only two things I can think of. Either A, the stone cork was actually made during those ancient time periods. Maybe it was used before the Man in Black was thrown in there and removed for some reason for a time period, and then placed back in there when the Man in Black became the smoke monster. Or B, like I mentioned earlier, those races could have survived longer on the island than in recorded history that we know of. Or maybe a more plausible answer to fit with what the producers said is that we know Jacob has an affinity for Egyptian culture inside the statue, so he could have made it himself and carved the ancient languages on it, and then used it to plug up the hole after throwing his brother in there. Another interesting theory is that the source and the cork could be the Well of All Souls. I saw this theory on Lostpedia, link in the description, and it describes that when Desmond removed the cork and the pool starts to drain, this starts the process of destroying all souls everywhere, like in ancient Egyptian mythology. The cork mentions Osiris, and in actual Egyptian mythology, there's something called an Osiris pillar, known as the Djed. In Egypt, during the Festival of Renewal, the Djed was lifted up in the air to represent security and balance under the current pharaoh. It's said that the Djed represents Osiris's backbone, the same as the Nile River representing his backbone, as the Nile River is the source of all life. So it's interesting that the source on the island has water and a stone pillar with the mention of Osiris on it, and according to Mother, it's the source of all life. So the Djed stone pillar is at the center of the Well of All Souls, and get this.
Right now, I need you to tell me what's going on.
We actually see the Man in Black carving the Well of All Souls on his staff during season 6. The Well of All Souls is usually depicted as an animal head on top with a forked bottom, which was starting to look like the Man in Black's staff, but unfortunately we didn't get to see it completed. The Well of All Souls is also associated with Set, who, like I mentioned above, killed his brother, the leader and king Osiris. So how exactly does the cork work? All we know that once the cork is removed, it stops the flow of water, and without the water, the island loses its cooling system in a sense and starts to self-destruct. It's possible that when the cork's inserted, it acts like a weight sensor that opens up the river nearby to feed it water, and not having the stone in there blocks the water. It could also limit the amount of energy that the source releases. We know that others have been in there because we saw the skeletons in the cave, but they died most likely due to the electromagnetism that only Desmond could survive. Maybe having the cork made it easier to control and send the light source across the island. It could also be similar to the Swan Station, where some Egyptians were down there and messing with the light, had some sort of incident, and used that cork as an archaic form of the button.
It's the best idea I ever heard.
So back to the episode. The Man in Black leaves and Jack tackles him from behind, punches his face, and causes him to bleed for the first time.
Looks like you were wrong, too.
Locke slams Jack's head with a rock and escapes. Jack, like Ben, at this point probably has a softer head than an NFL player. Back to the Flash sideways, Eloise sits down at Desmond's table and says she made it clear that he shouldn't do what he's doing, but Desmond says he chose to ignore it and that they're going to leave. Eloise, who clearly knows what the Flash sideways is, asks Desmond if he's going to take her son Daniel with him.
Not with me. No.
Meanwhile, Claire starts to go into labor when Charlie comes from backstage and Kate makes him get blankets and water. As Claire's pushing, Kate starts remembering the island timeline and flashes to when Claire was giving birth on the island and she was in the exact same position as she is now. Obviously, Aaron's super important to Kate too, as she watched and took care of Aaron as her own in the flash forwards. And after she gives birth, Claire has her own flashes and remembers her time on the island as well. Charlie comes back and Kate emotionally thanks him.
Just blanket.
And then Claire takes Charlie's hand and he remembers in one of the most tear-jerking moments of really the entire series in my opinion, as Charlie, Claire, and baby Aaron embrace once again. Desmond appears and asks Kate if she understands now, as she nods and asks, what now? Back in the normal timeline, earthquakes rage, a storm comes, and the island starts to sink, like the Man in Black predicted.
How'd you know that was gonna happen?
When Ben pushes Hurley out of the way to save him from a falling tree. Jack wakes up from his beating and can't find Locke. He goes back inside the heart to try and find Desmond, but there's no response. Hurley, Sawyer, and Kate try to get the tree off Ben, but struggle to do so when Miles calls on the walkie-talkie and Kate answers. She asks if Claire's with them, but Miles says no, and that they're taking off in an hour. Hey, look, Sawyer got a haircut between shots.
Can you teach me how to do that?
Ben says that he knows how to get to the plane quickly by using Locke's boat that he planned on using to escape with. We then go to Locke, who's standing on the cliff above the cave where Jacob had all the candidates' names on the wall, while looking at his boat, the Elizabeth, which was Desmond's boat if you remember, the one that originally brought him to the island. Before he can climb down to it though, Jack arrives and the final showdown begins. A funny little continuity error here. The Man in Black looks at the boat with no blood on his face, then Jack yells his name and he turns around with blood on his face.
How the hell do you think that happened?
Maybe he got a bad bloody nose in that half second, who knows. It was a high cliff after all. And I thought it was hilarious. I loved before the commercial break, Jack becomes a combination of Michael Jordan and Superman. I believe I can fly. Getting like 10 feet of air off the ground. And then when we come back from the break, he gets less air in his jump than current Charles Barkley.
See these two, man. Are you kidding me?
Before the break? After the break. Okay, not that pathetic, but Jack kicks the smoke monster in the groin. He's still a man after all. Even as a smoke monster, I'm sure it still hurts. Locke headbutts Jack, who at this point, it's surprising he has any memory at all. The knife starts to fall off the cliff, they struggle, and Locke gets it and ultimately stabs Jack right where his appendix would have been if he didn't already move it in season 1. You guys want to hear something really crazy about this scene?
No.
While they were filming the scene, they were supposed to switch out a real knife for a collapsible one, and forgot to, apparently, or the prop master just hated Matthew Fox. So Matthew Fox was actually stabbed with a real knife, but luckily had Kevlar, which is bulletproof material, as a pad underneath his shirt.
You might be all right.
He was trying out different protective pads for that scene, and the real knife wasn't switched for that specific take where he was using the Kevlar, and that was the only take they did where he was using a protective pad that would actually stop a knife. They even suggested that he don't use a protective pad for the scene, that it's just a retractable knife, it's not gonna hurt you, and it makes your shirt look more bulky. So this was the last shot he was actually gonna use that in.
Whoa.
As Locke tries to go for the finishing blow, Jack grabs his hand and the knife cuts Jack's neck. This brings us back to the first episode of season 6, when in the flash sideways on the plane, Jack notices that he has a cut on his neck in the exact same place. And this is an explanation for things to come at the end of the episode. Locke tells Jack that he died for nothing, right before Kate shows up and shoots him in the back.
I saved you a bullet!
We saw at the beginning of the episode in the montage, Ben loads this exact gun with the bullets that ultimately kill the man in black as he glances over at him, which was some nice foreshadowing on their part. It's also ironic because when Kate shoots at him earlier, the man in black tells her to save her bullets.
It's ironic.
Locke looks around at all the earthquakes and proclaims that they're too late, and then Jack Spartan kicks him off the cliff like a rag doll, just like the man in black did to Jacob into the fire.
This is Sparta!
More irony here, real Locke becomes paralyzed by falling down 8 stories and landing on his back after being manipulated by his father. Fake Locke does the manipulating of other people, fell off a cliff, and landed on his back, I'm assuming also breaking it while dying too. And thus ends the story of Fake Locke, the smoke monster, the man in black. And you know what? I actually feel sorry for the man in black.
Why?
He was just a boy who finds out that his real mom was killed by his current mother.
I'm your mother.
You killed my mother.
Feels like he's trapped in a place he doesn't belong.
I know now. There is another place across the sea. It's where I'm from. And I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go home.
And just wants to leave, but he's forced to stay there against his will.
Just let me leave, Jacob.
As long as I'm alive, you're not going anywhere.
Yes, he does a lot of bad things in order to get away.
Well, then now you know why I want to kill you. And I will kill you, Jacob.
Even if you do, somebody else will take my place.
Well, then I'll kill them too.
But in his backstory especially, I felt bad for him. And honestly, even though Jacob is portrayed as the good guy, and for the most part he is when it comes to protecting the island, when you strip all that away, he could be the bad guy in a lot of ways compared to the man in black.
He wants you to prove it.
He manipulates people against their will in order to come to an island, killing many innocent people in the process.
I brought all of you here because I made a mistake. Because of that, there's a very good chance that every single one of you and everyone you've ever cared about is going to die.
And claims that the reason is for people who are lost to find redemption, but really, he was just trying to find a candidate to take over for him and relieve him of his job duties. You could argue that he didn't even want the job anymore since he didn't fight back when Ben stabbed him. A reasonable deduction could be that he'd rather die than be protector. Of course I jest, but the evidence is there.
Yep.
He makes Ben his puppet and treats him like dirt, especially after Ben devoted his whole life to him, essentially saying that Ben didn't matter.
What was it that was so wrong with me? What about me?
What about you?
He chose to believe and live a lie instead of believing his brother when he told him the actual truth.
Stop it! She's not even our mother! Ah!
And he prefers to answer in riddles instead of giving a direct answer. In my opinion, just makes you pure evil.
You brought it here? Why?
Think of this wine as what you keep calling hell.
Can you hear me? Why are you answering my questions?
Did anyone else feel this way? Like, I don't know if I'm the only one who actually feels bad for the man in black in a way. Plus, even more sad, he was the only main character in the entire series who never left the island.
Why not?
Also, the only person who ever tells us that the island is holding back pure evil from the world is Mother, who's a kidnapper, a murderer, a liar. So maybe he could have left and everything would have been okay?
Yeah.
Plus, as a side note, if the man in black ended up becoming mortal after the stone was removed, couldn't he just leave the island and live his remaining 30 or so years of life in peace? I'm pretty sure he lost his powers after that, and I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be able to destroy the world then. And yeah, I know the island would be gone forever. Okay, rant over, moving on. I thought it was a fantastic transition from dead, fake Locke to eyes closed, real Locke as he was brought out of surgery in the flash sideways. And I'm not sure how many of you guys caught this, but I thought it was hilarious how the first thing that's said when we come back to this timeline is,
Nice work, Dr. Shepard.
After Jack just killed Locke in the normal timeline. Jack starts to leave for the concert when Locke wakes up early, even though he had a full dose of anesthesia. The first thing Locke says is that it worked.
I can feel my legs.
Jack says that it's highly unlikely, but Locke starts to move his toes, which flashes him to the island when he first crashes, and the island heals him of his paralysis. This is what causes him to remember, and when he asks Jack if he remembers, Jack has a moment where he flashes but resists. Locke says that they need to go, but Jack tries to get the nurse to give Locke a sedative. And one random fact, that nurse is named Nurse Jean, and she's actually the final named character to be introduced in the show. And that, unfortunately, is when you know we're getting closer to the end.
All the colors are long gone.
Jack says that he needs to go see his son, but Locke informs him that he doesn't have a son. Jack's angered and confused and tries to leave when Locke tells him,
I hope that somebody does for you what you just did for me.
Back on the island, Kate holds Jack as they both realize that his stab wound is probably fatal, but Jack says it's fine to just find some thread and he'll count to 5. This is a reference to the very first episode of Lost when Kate's sewing Jack's wound and Jack tells her the story of his past about calming his fears when he was performing a surgery.
I'd let the fear in, let it take over, let it do its thing, but only for 5 seconds. That's all I was going to give it.
The rest of the group finds them when Kate informs them that Locke is dead and it's over. We stay with Sawyer, but this time in the flash sideways when he enters Son's hospital room. Jin and Son are extra smiley, which would be a little creepy if they didn't already have their flashes, and remember their time on the island with Sawyer.
Hey, hello.
He asks if they know where Saeed is, and Son says they don't need protection anymore from Saeed. Jin says, we'll see you there, as they leave.
See me where?
On the island, Frank gets the plane to work except the hydraulics. He gets Miles to go fix it when Ben calls asking for an ETA.
Don't bother me!
Sounds like they're making progress.
The earthquakes keep happening, and Jack tells them that the island will sink unless they turn back on whatever Desmond turned off. Jack implores them to go on without him and let him fix it. And Jack wishes Sawyer good luck.
Thanks, Doc, for everything.
Ben puts on his best Titanic captain hat and says if the island's going down, he is too. And Hurley claims he can't go down the flimsy wooden ladders, so he's staying with Jack. Heroic gesture or self-preservation? You decide.
I kind of don't want to talk about it.
Jack gives his final goodbye to Kate and his final kiss. They each say they love each other, knowing they won't see each other ever again in this timeline. We go to Miles, who ends up fixing the plane.
I don't believe in a lot of things, but I do believe in duct tape.
And Frank tells Sawyer that they're running out of time. So Sawyer and Kate decide to jump instead of climbing down all the ladders to get to the boat. Back to the hospital of the flash sideways, Sawyer starts to leave the hospital when he runs into Jack and asks where he can get something to eat. Jack points him to the vending machine and Sawyer says,
Thanks, Doc.
Like he always used to, without realizing that Jack is a doctor since he's not in uniform. He looks confused and he almost remembers, which I thought was a great touch because it truly shows that Jack was that important to him in their normal timeline and instrumental in his transformation. Sawyer chooses an Apollo bar at the vending machine, which, if you remember, was one of the food items found in the Swan Hatch pantry, and the only one without Dharma packaging on it. Apollo bars also appear many other times in the show.
One of these yours?
Machine got stuck.
I guess I just needed a little push.
Also, if any of you played the Lost Experience alternate reality game, Apollo bars took on a whole different meaning as they were a major part of that experience, and even real ones were given out to fans, where they could post pictures of their rapper online and their locations were added to a world map, where as part of the experience, the Hanso Foundation could find out where their enemies really were. And throughout that experience, there were hidden websites to access, a new storyline to follow, and so much more. It was so super intricate, and if you want to read more about it, I'll include it in the description below, but it's just one of the many ways that Lost engaged with its audience, using primarily social media, which was instrumental at the time. The Apollo bar gets jammed when Juliet comes into the room. She tells him that if you unplug it and plug it back in, it'll fix it. Sawyer does that and it short circuits the lights, but Juliet grabs the bar and says it worked, as they touch and have flashes to the normal timeline of being together. You can really see the pain in Juliet's eyes as she remembers her death. Juliet says we should get coffee sometime and then touch again, experiencing flashes and gaining full memory of their time on the island, as they embrace in another one of the most emotional scenes of not just this episode, but in my opinion, the entire series.
I got you.
I got you.
Not only is this scene incredibly well acted, but it's full of hidden secrets and symbolism, just like so many of the moments in Lost. Remember when Juliet's dying after she detonates Jughead to cause the incident? Sawyer's holding her, and she's going in and out of consciousness? Well, this hospital scene with Sawyer is being lived out for her during that moment. That's why she tells Miles it worked from beyond the grave when he communicates with her.
That's what she wanted to tell you. It worked.
She was experiencing the flash sideways while dying. Another amazing part about this specific scene is that Juliet is actually describing the ending of Lost to a T.
What did you say?
There's a few people I've seen talk about this, but the first time I saw it was from a YouTuber named Locked Up Tedros, so credit to him, link in the description. But for this recap, I'll put the clips side by side so it'll make sense.
Can I tell you a secret?
Please.
If you unplug it, the candy just drops right down.
Is that right?
Yes, and it's technically legal.
One day you can make up your own game and everyone else will have to follow your rules.
Give it a shot. Oops.
I'm going to find a loophole, my friend.
It worked.
And then you think you're gonna destroy the island.
I think? And what's going to happen, Jack?
I'm gonna kill you.
How do you plan to do that?
That's a surprise.
And then you plug it back in again?
I think this whole scene with Juliet and Sawyer, despite being only 3 minutes, was one of the most powerful of the whole episode. We go to Jack, who arrives at the concert after it finishes, when Kate walks up to him, and Jack doesn't know how he remembers her. After Kate reminds him that he stole her pen on Flight 815, the one in this timeline that is, Jack wonders out loud if that's how he knows her.
No. That's not how you know me.
She approaches Jack, puts her hands on his face, and causes him to have flashes of their memories together on the island. He resists again and doesn't know what's happening. Kate tells him though that if he comes with her, he'll understand. Back in the normal timeline, Hurley helps Jack walk back to the heart of the island. When they get there, Jack tells Hurley that he's going down alone, and when Hurley states that if Desmond didn't make it, then Jack won't, Jack explains that he won't be coming back, that this is what's supposed to happen. Hurley gets emotional, saying the island needs Jack, but Jack tells him that it's actually Hurley that's needed by the island. Ben's probably like, you do know I'm right here. Poor Ben.
Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm sure it's the onions.
Hurley tries to plead with Jack, but he says it was supposed to be like this. That if someone has to protect the island, it should be him.
I believe in you.
Which is exactly what Hurley told Jack earlier in this episode before he went into the heart.
I believe in you, dude.
Hurley accepts, but only temporarily until Jack comes back.
Deal.
Jack then performs the same ceremony that Jacob did for him, formally making Hurley the new protector of the island.
Is that it?
And just like Jacob said to Jack, and Mother said to Jacob,
now you're like me.
Now you and I are the same.
Now you're like me.
It's also ironic because Hurley was thankful that he wasn't Jacob's replacement, but now he becomes Jack's replacement. This shot also mirrors a scene from season 2 when Jack gives control and leadership to Hurley. There was a behind the scenes video of Jorge Garcia, the actor who plays Hurley, reading part of the final script on camera, and I'll put the link below if you want to see the whole thing. But after he finished reading this specific scene, I thought it was pretty special.
I did kind of think about this, but it's different when it's real and you're reading it for the first time.
Hurley and Ben lower Jack into the heart, and Jack finds Desmond alive but hurt. Desmond says it didn't work, and that he thought it would cause him to leave this place, meaning this timeline. Jack carries Desmond back to the rope and tells him that he's done enough and to go be with his wife and son, who, if you forgot, was named Charlie after the man who saved Desmond once already. When Desmond asks, "What about you, Jack?" Jack responds with Desmond's famous line,
"I'll see you in another life, brother."
These are also the last words ever spoken by Jack in this timeline. I wanted to bring up a point about Desmond after rewatching the whole series again. He was always one of my favorite characters, but I guess I didn't notice just how he is probably the most important character in the entire show for making sure the timeline of events actually happen, that there's no time paradox. Remember, there's so many people in the past who seem to be very knowledgeable about events on the island and what's supposed to happen in the timelines, who constantly tell him that he was meant for a greater purpose.
It's your path to go to the island. You don't do it because you choose to, Desmond. You do it because you're supposed to.
But the Abbey clearly isn't where you were meant to end up. I have little doubt that God has different plans than you being a monk, Desmond.
bigger plans.
Oh, aye, sure he does.
He does.
That's why Jacob said that Desmond was his trump card in a sense, his last resort in case all else failed. By being on the island and turning the failsafe key, it allowed him, presumably, to withstand electromagnetism and caused him to go in and out of consciousness, which allowed him to communicate with various people from the past, which formed events in the future. And it's the reason that events in this last episode were able to come to be. And in the Flash Sideways timeline, he's also the conduit to bringing all the losties together so that they can remember, which leads to the events at the very end of this episode. I was watching a random episode the other day, it's called Catch 22, where Desmond visits Ruth, which if you remember, she was the woman that he left a week before their wedding, before Penny. And I came to a part that I haven't really heard talked about before, but it made me think about Desmond's journey, his importance, and perhaps foreshadowing the end.
There was this man standing over me, Ruth, and he reached out his hand and he said to me, "Can I help you, brother?" And the first thing I noticed was the rope tied around his waist, and I looked at him and I knew I was supposed to go with him. I was supposed to leave everything that mattered behind, sacrifice all of it for a greater calling.
Well, it's a good thing a bloody shepherd didn't help you up. Or I suppose you'd be off with the sheep, wouldn't you?
Do you guys think that this could have been a reference to the end? Back on the island, Sawyer and Kate go find Claire as mountains start crumbling around them.
Oh, that ain't good.
Hopefully Rose and Bernard weren't on that cliff.
I didn't ask for this!
The Ajira plane starts up and's ready to take off, but Claire doesn't want to leave because she says the island's made her crazy. Kate convinces her though that she isn't and that she'll be a good mother to Aaron, so she agrees to come and they run off to the plane. Frank's about to take off when he finally sees Sawyer, Kate, and Claire, and they hop on board just in time. They narrowly avoid crashing, but ultimately take off safely and start to leave. They're finally safe and going back home.
Amen.
Jack enters the dried up source and picks up the stone cork, heaving it into the hole. He falls down as water eventually starts pouring all around him and the light starts to return. He knows it worked.
It worked.
Ben and Hurley pull up who they think is Jack, but it turns out to be Desmond.
Desmond? No.
Gee, thanks, Hurley. Glad you're happy I'm alive. We go to Locke in the Flash Sideways, who arrives at Eloise's church. He gets helped out of the taxi and put into his wheelchair when he encounters Ben sitting outside the church. And remember, the last time real Locke was alive in the original timeline, Ben choked him to death.
Oh, Benjamin.
Ben tells Locke that most of them are in the church and that he's sorry for what he did to him, that he was jealous because Locke was special and wanted what Locke had.
I forgive you.
Ben says Locke's forgiveness matters more than he can say and won't be joining the rest of them in the church, that he needs to work some things out first. He then tells Locke that he doesn't need to be in the wheelchair anymore, and Locke realizes this, stands up, which I thought was powerful because even though Ben tore Locke down in the normal timeline, he lifted him up in the Flash Sideways. Michael Emerson, the actor who plays Ben, admitted that there was a deleted scene where he's looking through a high school yearbook, sees his daughter Alex from the main timeline, and regains his memories of life on the island, as Alex would have been his constant or memory trigger. We go back to the island and we see Desmond's bodies outside the heart. One question that does arise from all of this is why did Desmond or Jack not become a smoke monster like the Man in Black did? After all, Mother said going down there would be a fate worse than death. Well, like I mentioned earlier, the producers did admit that the cork was placed down there after the Man in Black had become the smoke monster. So maybe the Man in Black fell into the actual hole, the actual hellish area that we saw, and that's how you become a smoke monster, whereas Jack and Desmond didn't go down that hole. It also begs the question of how scientifically the smoke monster can be explained. Obviously, to follow Lost, you have to allow for some supernatural explanations to happen, but could we explain the black smoke through scientific means?
What?
I saw a couple interesting theories on the Lostpedia theory section, links below if you want to see them all. What if the heart of the island, the source of light, was actually the highest concentration of dark matter than anywhere?
What?
Which has been contained to the island because of the extremely high levels of electromagnetism. Now, I'm not a scientist, and I can already hear scientists watching this saying, dark matter can't be here.
Yeah.
But just go with me for a second.
All right then. Let's have it.
When the Man in Black fell into the source, the actual hole, maybe his physical atoms were torn apart and destroyed at a quantum level, but he used his consciousness to control the dark matter levels and used them before complete death. And then he became a huge cloud of separated atoms, the dark matter keeping all the molecules constantly dividing, but kept together ultimately through the Man in Black's consciousness. Maybe what Jacob learned about the source from his mother was just a myth and believed by the ancient inhabitants of the island who didn't know potential scientific elements behind it. So how did the source come to be? Maybe its power, and I know this sounds insane, could be traced back to the Big Bang even.
What did you say?
I know this is probably bonkers, but just go with me. What if the island was the last remaining pocket of this electromagnetism on Earth? We know that Charles Widmore and Eloise Hawking and the Dharma Initiative refer to the island in this way, that it's a special place, the only one like it on Earth, with those levels of unique energy. Remember, Mother said that all life comes from the source and the light.
Because a little bit of this very same light is inside of every man, but they always want more.
And that if the light went out, so would all life on Earth. So maybe, just maybe, in Lost's canon, all life on Earth did come from that electromagnetism in the source. We know that drinking the water at the source gives people super abilities like immortality and omnipotence and omnipresence. It also controls time and has healing abilities. From what we know, Dharma got extremely close to exploiting that energy, and that's why Jacob had all his followers kill them. Same thing with the Man in Black and his people. They got dangerously close to exploiting that energy, and Mother killed all of them. Who knows, maybe even Miles has his abilities from drinking small doses of that water. As we know, he was born on the island and he has the ability to hear from dead people.
Hadn't thought of that.
Oh, you turn off all the lights.
I worked.
Oops.
Back to the show, Hurley gets emotional because Jack's gone, and Ben comforts Hurley by saying he needs to do what he does best, which is help people and start by getting Desmond back home. That people couldn't leave the island under Jacob's rules, but maybe there's a better way. Hurley asks Ben to help him and be his assistant, someone with experience.
I'd be honored.
Cool. And those are the final words ever spoken on the island in Lost.
They just, sort of came to me.
Having this honor is everything Ben ever wanted under Jacob, but never got. Actual respect and appreciation. Not being manipulated or being a pawn anymore. We flash to the sideways where Ben's still sitting on the bench, but Hurley comes outside and you can tell there's an actual genuine love and friendship between them that they didn't have when we last saw them.
Hello, Hugo.
Ben tells him that he's not coming in just yet, and Hurley tells him he was a really good number 2.
And you were a great number 1, Hugo.
This obviously references their time on the island together, and now the cracks are just coming off the Flash Sideways mystery at this point. I'll revisit this dynamic in just a little bit. Jack and Kate pull up to the church, the place where Jack was supposed to have his father's funeral. Kate tells him that they're here because of his father's funeral, and that he should go in through the back entrance. She says she'll be waiting for him inside once he's ready. He asks her, ready for what?
To leave.
And goes inside the church. On the island, we see Jack, who's laying in the exact same spot that the Man in Black's dead body was when Jacob found him 2,000 years ago. Jack wakes up in obvious pain and starts walking to his final resting place, where we can clearly see his audio equipment in several shots here. I thought it was yet another amazing transition between the two timelines. In one of them, Jack just sacrificed himself to save the world, and in the other timeline, the very next shot, we see a statue of Christ the Redeemer. Jack walks into the church in the Flash Sideways, where his father's final resting place is supposed to be. The whole ending scene in the Flash Sideways was so secretive and shot so secretively as to not cause leaks or blow the ending of the show that the scene was actually called Jin and Son's Wedding in the production notes. The staff had extra decoys to make it look like a wedding, and even had a woman that looked like Son in a wedding dress.
Married. Yeah, well, no, not to each other, no.
The chapel's filled with various symbols from different religions. The Star of David for Judaism, the Star and Crescent Moon for Islam, the which is used in a few religions but primarily for Hinduism, the cross for Christianity, the yin-yang symbol for Taoism, and the Dharma chakra for Buddhism, which is an 8-spoked wheel, very similar to the wheel that moves the island. And I know we've talked about that before in other recaps. Obviously, the writers are trying to say that regardless of specific religion, everyone comes to this place. Jack tearfully and emotionally walks over to his father's coffin and places his hand on it. Immediately, he gets a flash of his first moment on the island. Then he does it again and has flashes, regaining all his memories of his time on the island in the original timeline, meeting all the Losties, and his time with Kate. Once he remembers fully, he opens the coffin, and it's empty. But Jack hears a voice behind him. He turns around and it's his father, standing right there.
Dad? Hello, Jack.
Jack says he doesn't understand because he's supposed to be dead, to which Christian affirms. Jack asks him how he's here right now, and Christian responds back by asking how Jack is here now too. Jack starts to realize what the flash sideways actually is and confirms it for all of us.
I died too.
Christian comforts his son, and it's something Jack always wanted in his life, his dad's approval and love. Christian says he's real, Jack's real, as well as all the people in the church. They're real too. And more importantly for us and what the whole show is about, everything that happened to you is real. I'll revisit this at the end when I talk about the show as a whole. Jack asks if every one of his friends in the church are dead.
Everyone dies sometime, kiddo. Some of them before you, some long after you.
Again, I'll talk about this at the end, but that last line is really important too. Christian explains that there is no now, no here. Time is irrelevant. And then the big question comes, where are we, Dad? AKA, what is the flash sideways?
This is a place that you all made together so that you could find one another.
That the most important and meaningful part of Jack's life was the time he spent with all of the people on the island. That's why all of them are here. They needed Jack and he needed all of them. To remember
and to let go.
Jack chuckles a little bit and remembers that Kate said they were leaving, and Christian says that they aren't leaving, they're
moving on.
Jack asks where they're going, and Christian tells him they should go find out. The last 4 minutes of the show is an incredibly well done and emotional montage that goes between the flash sideways, aka purgatory, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes, and Jack's last moments alive on the island, aka his life. Jack greets all his friends from his lifetime as they all now remember their lives together and realize what's about to happen. To me, I really like the specific people they chose for Jack to greet and to hug. I really loved how Locke was the first one to greet Jack. So much of the show was about their dynamic, faith versus science, belief versus doubt, leaving versus staying, miracles versus coincidences. It was the focus of my final teaser from 4 days ago. Jack became Locke in the end and finally believed him. Again, Locke's dying wish was for Jack to believe him, and he knows now that Jack did. For two people that were at odds with each other for most of the show, you can truly see the admiration and respect in the scene, especially with Jack.
We've been waiting for you now.
And those were the last 5 words ever spoken on the show Lost, which I thought was perfect to allow Locke to say those words specifically to Jack as the final phrase.
It's destiny.
Even though he said, "We've been waiting for you," I kind of took that as, "I've been waiting for you, to believe me, to understand, and to change." And Jack finally believed him in the end. Locke was right all along. Then Jack greets Desmond, and of all the people he greets, he gives Desmond the longest hug. To me, this shows just how thankful and appreciative Jack was for what Desmond did in his life. He realizes that if it wasn't for Desmond, none of them would be there. Not just in the island timeline, but the flash sideways. Along with Locke, Desmond was instrumental in Jack's life, in his transformation to a man of faith, to believe. Desmond was also the last one Jack ever saw or talked to in his life. And remember, the last thing Jack ever said to Desmond.
I'll see you in another life, brother.
Well, I think they realize in this moment, they're now seeing each other literally in another life. Then he smiles big when he sees Boone, as I always thought Jack saw a lot of himself in Boone, and Boone's death was the first major one on the island. Then Hurley gives him a big bear hug, the last 2 protectors of the island. All of the couples and Constance are together and finally at peace. The second to last person Jack greets is Sawyer, who was one of his biggest rivals on the island, but became a friend towards the end. Sawyer himself had a huge transformation, and Jack played a big part in that. And finally, he greets Kate, the woman he loved in his life, his constant. They realize their story isn't over though, and they go sit down at the church pews along with everyone else. We see all the couples we knew from the show back together, finally at peace and ready for their next journey. On the island, Jack knows he's about to die as he slowly makes his way back to the bamboo grove and passes by the white shoe that's still hanging from the branch we haven't seen since the beginning of the first episode. The old shoe belonged to Jack, but he used them for his dad's corpse because he didn't feel like his father was worth a pair of new shoes. Showing the shoe here is also a reminder of how far that relationship has come and how much appreciation they have for each other now in death. And we can see that Christian's actually wearing those white shoes in the church as well. We hear a dog bark and it's Vincent, and he runs towards Jack just like we saw in the first episode. He licks Jack's face and lays down beside him. And this scene was really special because it goes back to Jack's famous speech in season 1.
Last week, most of us were strangers, but we're all here now. And God knows how long we're gonna be here. But if we can't live together, we're gonna die alone.
Well, Vincent lays down by Jack's side to make sure he doesn't die alone, as Jack was instrumental in all of them surviving and finding redemption. And that just goes to show that we don't deserve dogs. Right, Piper? Oh. Bad timing for that bite. In the church, as they all sit down in the church pews and Christian walks towards the door in the back, the shot reminded me almost of them sitting in a plane. Did anyone else feel that way? I thought it was a really nice touch. As Vincent is lying next to Jack, he looks up and sees the Ajira plane with his friends finally safe and free and is filled with joy. As Christian opens the door in the back, a glowing heavenly light engulfs everyone in the church. Jack and Kate smile at each other, and Jack looks ahead, finally at peace and ready to move on. And the last shot of Lost is just how the show originally opened, in reverse. Jack's eye closes, and he's gone to the flash sideways to remember and to move on.
I'm not lost anymore.
One incredible aspect of this final sequence was how it mirrored almost exactly the very first sequence, bookending the whole show together and bringing it full circle. I want to show you all a side-by-side of the very first sequence in reverse and this final sequence in real time. That way you can see just how similar they were. I saw on Lostpedia the actual script ending and thought it would be really appropriate to end the recap portion of this video by having it read and by someone with a much better voice than me while playing those two scenes side by side.
As he moves through the bamboo forest, it's hard to grasp that he's even on his feet. But his eyes are set. Jack stumbles as he walks. And now he sees a shoe hanging from a tree. And now he can go no further. He sits down, but even that is too much for his ravaged body. Then a sound through the bamboo. Something comes towards him. Jack manages to turn his head slightly. He blinks as we reveal Vincent. The dog approaches Jack, just as it did so long ago on the day Oceanic 815 first crashed here. But this time, Vincent does not run away. He stays, and as Vincent nestles into the crook of Jack's arm and gently licks his face, we understand why he has come, to say goodbye. Jack hears something else now, distant, up there in the sky, the Ajira plane. The plane clears frame, finally free of the island. Jack Shepherd has done what he came to this place to do. He has found his purpose. He has found love and been loved. He has finally found a way to love himself. The bamboo sways across the blue sky, and Jack Shepherd's eye closes one final time. He is gone. The end. Now, back to someone with a much worse voice than mine, SeanieB.
I thought how they brought that back full circle was just incredible. Now, before I give my thoughts on how I like the actual episode and the show as a whole, it's really important to me to talk about what we just saw, especially in the last 15 minutes or so, and what it all means. The biggest thing I have to address first is, were they dead the whole time? Did they all die in the initial crash on the island? Was the island and the whole show just purgatory?
I seriously doubt that.
I keep bringing up purgatory, and just in case you haven't heard it before, purgatory is a predominantly Catholic belief, an immediate state after death just before going to heaven or judgment, which is essentially what the Flash Sideways is. And the producers even talked about really wanting to explore the idea of purgatory. Now, for some reason, there's a really big misconception about the ending of the show, and actually a major reason that I hear from a lot of people on why they didn't like the finale. A lot of people, and I mean a lot, think for some reason that the characters were dead the whole time.
You mean that figuratively, right?
No, I mean literally.
That it was just a dream or a state of being after death to find redemption, and that the island wasn't actually a real place.
Why?
I don't want to come off harsh to you guys if that's what you've believed to be true this entire time.
Might want to take it easy on him.
But to me, the show was extremely clear that that was not the case. When Jack was in the church at the end talking to his father, he asks him, wait, was any of this even real? And Christian says that yes, everything that happened in your life was real. That means the original timeline, the normal timeline, the timeline where Flight 815 crashes on the island, their flashbacks, their flash forwards, all of it was real. It wasn't purgatory, and they didn't die in the crash.
Oh yeah?
Yep.
The island was real, and everything that happened on the show was real. The only thing that wasn't real in the show was the flash sideways. That was actual purgatory and where they went to after they died. I'm not sure why that became such a mainstream idea, but the idea seemed to take off, and a lot of people believed it and still do to this day. Here's an interview from The Verge, linked to the whole video in the description, and I'll reference it a couple other times in just a bit, where producer Damon Lindelof explains that everything was real.
I wasn't disappointed with with Lost not giving me answers at the end. What I was actually disappointed with the answer it gave, which it felt like the answer was all of the things that just happened didn't really mean anything. They kind of didn't happen. That was my takeaway from it.
What do you mean they didn't happen?
It was like all of the things that happened, all of these things that were set up as, you know, you've got to stop the Man in Black because X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
It didn't matter.
Right.
Well, because it wasn't real.
Yes, it was.
Well, but not really. I mean, it was like a shared fantasy. I mean, it didn't seem like there was like, I mean, what?
No.
So the things that were going on the island were happening in the actual world?
Yes.
So they were happening in like our timeline.
Correct. So at the end of the show, the last frame of the show, Matthew Fox closes his eye and dies. That happened. That's all real. So then, from the moment that he closed his eye, the flash sideways, where nobody knows each other, and the plane never crashed, that's what you would define as not having happened. Anything that takes place on the island in Lost, everything that you saw throughout those 6 seasons, happened.
A lot of people I've talked to personally were like this interviewer, who were disappointed in the ending because they didn't think that anything that happened on the show was real. A lot of people thought that, in part because the decision to have the end credits of the final episode show a plane crash without anyone there. Audiences could understandably think that this meant no one survived the crash, when in actuality, it was the decision of the ABC executives to put those scenes in there as a kind of emotional buffer between the ending of Lost and the nightly news. Producers Carlton Cuse and Damon Lindelof, in almost every interview I've seen them in since the show ended, have said this was their biggest regret of the final episode.
You sure?
Because it led a lot of people to believe that the island was actually purgatory. Also, time isn't a thing in the flash sideways like it is in normal life. Some people were confused that they were all there at the same time, thinking that it meant that they all died at the same time in the initial crash. Christian was saying that no matter how many years it was between deaths, they were all in the flash sideways at the same time. Boone was the first one to die in the church, and then people like Charlie and Jin and Sun and Jack and others that we saw there die a few years later on the island. Kate, Claire, and Sawyer presumably live a full life after they leave the island and die decades later. And in the case of Hurley and Ben, that's who Christian refers to as way later. If Jacob as protector lived for over 2,000 years with someone trying to kill him every single waking moment of his life, it's safe to assume that Hurley lived for way longer than that before he found someone to replace him. So say Hurley lived for 10,000 years and then died.
Finally give him the rest that he's earned.
He would still appear in the flash sideways at the same time as someone like Boone. It doesn't mean they all died in the plane crash.
Calm down. Right now, at this moment in time, Hurley and Ben, and with some help from Walt, are actually running things on the island, maintaining it.
And a very interesting note about what Damon Lindelof said in that clip there, that Walt is helping Hurley and Ben maintain the island. And very few people I talked to know that there was an actual epilogue after the show finished, essentially making that the final episode and answering some questions that we had. It was released after the season ended and included in the season 6 DVD set. I'll put a link to the video in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. A summary of that epilogue, titled The New Man in Charge, is that it takes place in Guam at the Dharma Logistics warehouse, where 2 Dharma Initiative workers are arguing about loading food pallets during their launch window. This scene answers one of the unanswered questions from the show. Why were food and supplies dropped off on the island in 2004 if the Dharma Initiative ended in the late 70s? A cool Easter egg here is that we see a printout that says the launch window was WED 24/08/10, aka August 24th, 2010, the date of the season 6 DVD release.
Whoa.
It's also Walt's birthday, who we'll see in just a little bit. Ben walks in and informs them that there's a new man in charge, which is referring to Hurley, the new protector of the island. He was sent to tie up loose ends and tells them that Dharma ended over 20 years ago, that they're no longer needed, and gives them a big severance pay, most likely from Hurley's lotto winnings. They have questions about where the packages have been sent, and when they find out they've been sending it to an island, they ask why the location always changes if it is an island.
The island moves.
When asked about the polar bear food, if it's in fact an island, Ben shows them the Hydra orientation film with Dr. Pierre Chang, not using an alias this time since it was his first orientation ever made, the first station, because it was station number 1. He explains how Dharma did experiments on animals on the island, and even hybrid birds, or as he calls them, high birds, which explains the Hurley bird from season 1. He talks about the polar bears and how they've been used on the island to test them against electromagnetism.
I repeat, the bears are not your friends.
He also says the electromagnetism of the Orchid Station has extremely harmful effects on early-term pregnancy, explaining what we had heard about the island being a tough place to give birth because of the electromagnetism. He lastly talks about experiments on humans in room 23. Remember, that was the room that Carl was being brainwashed in. How they kidnap natives on the island who worship their deity Jacob, and they brainwash and erase the memories to prevent the hostility in the population against Dharma.
I think we're going to need to see that again. We're going to need to watch that again.
Ben leaves and ends up going to the Santa Rosa Mental Health Institute, remember the same one Hurley used to be at, and sees Walt, who's playing Connect 4 by himself.
Man, I suck!
Like Lenny did before him. Walt goes by the alias Keith Johnson, which is probably in reference to his father's alias Kevin Johnson. Walt's a little hostile towards Ben, probably because of this.
We're gonna have to take the boy.
Ben apologizes.
I'm genuinely sorry about that.
Tells them that he's special and that they need him, that he has work to do, starting by helping his dad Michael. Walt says that his father's dead though.
Doesn't mean you can't help him.
Remember, last time we saw Michael, he was dead on the island and became one of the Whispers. The Whispers were explained as people who have died on the island and can't move on. I'm sure this is what Ben's referring to.
They whisper.
Walt finally agrees and goes into the car and finds Hurley there, and I thought it was cool how they played Jacob's theme song When We See Hurley here.
Hurley. It's great to see you, Walt.
After all, he is the new Jacob. Walt says he's always wished someone would come back for him and thought he was crazy. Hurley tells him he's not crazy at all and belongs on the island. And then Walt asks him why.
I want to talk to you about a job.
A lot of people have talked about what Lost should look like if it ever had a spin-off or a reboot, and I think it would be so great to follow these three as they discover the secrets of the island together. Just start the next show from this scene, in my opinion.
Yes!
I wanted to now talk about my thoughts on the ending of the show.
Then what are you thinking?
You guys know me, this is usually the part where I want to talk about theories and ideas and what's coming next, what does it all mean, and so on. But it's kind of hard to do when we know the answer already, when there isn't, unfortunately, nothing coming next week.
Damn it! Crap! Son of a...
And obviously we could theorize on some of the unanswered questions that we were still left with, and like I said, I'll be doing that in subsequent videos, but I think the thing to do here was to talk about what the show was truly about, and what this last episode was really about. It's no secret that the ending of Lost had a lot of mixed reviews, a lot of negative ones. I talked a little bit ago about how some of the negativity could have been misguided, but there were a lot of people, including me at first, who were honestly disappointed at the ending because of the lack of answers we were expecting. After years of analyzing the show and finding secrets and coming up with the most ridiculous and crazy theories with you guys, maybe its power, and I know this sounds insane, could be traced back to the Big Bang even.
What did you say?
And wondering what the final answers would be to all of our questions, the ending of the show decided to go in a different direction. Like, I really wanted more answers about the island's mythology, about the supernatural elements of the numbers.
What do the numbers mean?
To learn more about Walt's abilities, and Libby, and Eloise Hawking, and Jacob's cabin, and so many other things. I went into the episode not really anticipating everything to be answered or resolved, but I did spend a lot of the last episode constantly focused on the clock and thinking about how much time was left. It was like, okay, there's an hour left. Are we going to get answers to our questions? Okay, now 45 minutes and they still have to deal with the ending of all the characters. Okay, now 30 minutes left. Why are we wasting 10 seconds on a shot of a car pulling up when it could be 5 seconds?
I'd been spending so much time focused on the constants, I forgot about the variables.
Did anyone else feel this way, or was it just me the first time watching it?
Actually, no.
And after the episode ended, while I did appreciate the way the character arcs came to a resolution, I did initially feel disappointed in it at not being what I thought I wanted it to be. And looking back, I truly didn't give it a fighting chance. The expectations I had for it were just way too impossibly high to achieve, and I think it was that way for a lot of people too. Looking back on it now, pretty much anything they did wouldn't be good enough for us in our eyes. There was no singular way they could do the finale that would please everyone. Let's just be real.
First sensible thing you've said.
It honestly wasn't until I watched it a second time a few weeks later where my opinion radically changed.
Seems kind of wishy-washy.
I went into that viewing by myself this time, not focusing on the clock at all or how much time was left, and not focusing what I personally wanted out of the episode, or if they were going to answer all our questions because I already knew they weren't, but just on the storytelling, just on the characters, and the story and the ending that the writers wanted us to see. And I have to tell you, it was beautifully done. It was such a satisfying way to end the journey of Lost. The fact that everything actually happened on the island and mattered was really important to me. And seeing the character's story come to a resolution and an ending was also really important. But the way the last episode was told, the way it danced between timelines so fluidly was really impressive to me, especially as an editor, and this episode won an Emmy for editing. I loved the flow of this episode. I know I keep using terms like flow and fluid, but that's really important as an editor, and you can just tell when things seem forced and rushed and jaggedy and mechanical.
That's kind of weird. It's if all those things are true of what it says.
Versus stories that are seamless and smooth, and each clip has purpose and connection and reason. I also thought the last episode had amazingly clever references and often hidden messages to different past episodes or events in the show. The transitions from characters in the normal timeline to the flash sideways, or the characters performing similar or opposite actions in both timelines, or even just similar or opposite facial reactions as they were going between timelines. It was just chock full of irony and juxtaposition, two things I really appreciate, and also the storytelling of where the characters were in the flash sideways and how they all came together believably in just a few locations to remember. It was extremely well done in that regard and great storytelling, and definitely noticed a second time through. As much as Lost was about the mythos and the mysteries, it really truly was about the ensemble. People who were flawed and isolated in their own lives, who come together on an island, find redemption for their past transgressions, and move on. Jack felt unworthy in his father's eyes, and ultimately in the end was given his father's approval. Sawyer transformed and was able to forgive himself. Locke became a leader and found purpose. Charlie was a selfish drug addict who the island ended up cleansing. All of the characters were damaged in one way or another, and the island and the other people were the conduits for making them find some sort of self-awakening.
What did you say?
I really had a fundamental shift in the outlook of the whole entire show when I finally realized this. It took a while to shift my focus to what the show was truly about, and watching the whole series a few times back since then has really made me like it even more. I feel like the mystery of the show is the icing on the character story arc cake and not the other way around. Even if that's not what you wanted or what I wanted at first, that's what we got. To be honest, the first time around there was just some characters I really didn't care that much about. Jack, for instance, he's the main character, and to me at first he was just a hindrance from the interesting characters like Locke from discovering answers. But watching it through multiple times now, I've been able to see just how much depth a character like Jack has, how he wasn't just Mr. Perfect, he was really flawed, and he had the biggest transformation of almost anyone on the show, like I showed in my teaser 4 days ago. Now don't get me wrong, I do wish we got more answers to the show.
I want some friggin' answers!
And I'm not saying to watch the show with lowered expectations, just shifted expectations, and you'll like it a lot more, I bet. And don't even get me started with the feels. I'm a grown man, and it made me cry like a baby every single time I've seen it.
I know, it's embarrassing.
The most emotional parts for me used to be Charlie and Claire remembering, or seeing Desmond and Penny at the very end and how visibly in love they were while they were sitting in the church pew before moving on. But when I watched it recently, the part that really got to me was definitely seeing Jack in the church with his father. It was something that, God, even now, it was something that really, it was something that really hit close to home, and to be honest, something I look forward to as well. And then also seeing Locke come up first to greet Jack after having really focused on their relationship and transitions and dynamic during this last rewatch. It was an amazing ending in my opinion.
Fantastic.
It's not surprising to me that some people felt cheated or angry by the end, while others absolutely loved it. But if you're in the group who didn't like it, try to give it another chance without focusing on the unanswered questions.
Great plan, Moonbeam. After that, we can sing Kumbaya and do Trust Falls.
Lost was about so many things. It was about the characters.
I don't know your name.
I'm Kate.
The island.
But I've looked into the eye of this island. And what I saw was beautiful.
The mysteries.
Guys, where are we?
Time.
You can call me tonight or tomorrow.
I won't call for 8 years.
Good versus evil.
We're the good guys.
In my experience, the people who go out of their way to tell you they're the good guys are the bad guys.
Science versus faith.
Why do you find it so hard to believe? Why do you find it so easy? It's never been easy.
Symbolism.
One is light, one is dark.
Plot twists.
We're gonna have to take the boy.
Cliffhangers.
We were not supposed to leave.
We have to go back.
Drama.
But you saved my life, brother, so that I could save yours.
Irony.
Mega number 42. Whoever has those.
Juxtaposition.
Because you're a man of science.
Yeah, what does that make you?
Me? Well, I'm a man of faith.
Coincidence.
Don't mistake coincidence for fate.
Parallels.
I've done everything you wanted me to do. So why did you do this? Why?
Heartbreak.
It's okay.
Don't you leave me.
I love you.
You don't let go.
I love you, James.
And triumph.
Don't you walk away from me. You don't know who you're dealing with. Don't ever tell me what I can't do. Ever. Don't tell me what I can't do.
But most of all, Lost was about the relationships and the connections the characters formed.
I know that. We're together. We've always been and always will be.
Think about it for a second. The main prominent concept was about connections and relationships. The Constant was the episode writers talked about the most, as it discussed things like having something or someone you truly care about to navigate through life, challenges,
I'm still here, can you hear me?
and even something like the dangers of time travel.
I love you, Benny.
Finding that constant, no matter what it is, was Lost's ultimate goal in order to have an awakening and move on to the next life.
Where are we going? Let's go find out.
Once I watched the final episode with all that in mind, I ended up loving it. It was an amazing end to a show about finding yourself and finding your purpose, and it's a message we can all take away from the series, that no matter who you are, as corny and as cheesy as it sounds, we all need others to get us through life. Lost wasn't named Lost because of people who were stranded on an island. It's because all of the people who crashed there were lost in their own lives. And that's really what the show's all about. Lost constantly circled the idea of loss. The characters hated themselves and were incomplete, but they were that way because they made it that way from choices they made in the past. It caused them to shut off to others around them and be isolated, but that's normal, that's human. Lost told the story that the way to go forward and the way to find redemption was to walk into your jungle where anything could happen, to confront your inner demons just like the characters on the show did. The Losties crashed on an island with total strangers, found a community with each other, and because of that community, they were able to encounter those that they were most afraid to confront in their life, have an awakening, discover their true constant, and ultimately let go. With all that said, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me for 10 years. You all mean the world to me, and you have no idea how much your support means to me. This journey we've been on together has been unexpected, but sometimes those stories are the ones we remember most. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And like Desmond always used to say, I'll see you in another life, or maybe sooner than you think. Love you guys.
This place is different. It's special. The others don't want to talk about it because it scares them, but we all know it. We all feel it. What if everything that happened here happened for a reason? Do you really think all this is an accident? That we, a group of strangers, survived? Many of us with just superficial injuries? You think we crashed on this place by coincidence? Especially this place? We were brought here for a purpose, for a reason, all of us. Each one of us was brought here for a reason.
Last week, most of us were strangers, but we're all here now. If we can't live together, we're gonna die alone.
Every equation needs stability, something known. It's called a constant. Then you need to find something that you really, really care about.
Because all we really need to survive is one person who truly loves us.
It doesn't matter who we were. It only matters who we are.
You don't want to be rescued, do you? And if you can't leave, neither can I.
I woke up this morning, I thought it's time to stop feeling sorry for yourself and seize the day, and think of anyone I would rather do some day seizing with than you.
So I'm going to turn to you first. Are you with me?
I have always been with you.
Jen, you have to go. No. Please go.
I won't leave you.
Jack, I hope that somebody does for you what you just did for me.
I don't know where I am, but
I'll find you, Des.
I promise.
No matter what.
I'll come back to you.
I won't give up.
I promise.
I promise. I love you.
The most important part of your life was the time that you spent with these people. That's why all of you are here. Nobody does it alone, Jack. You needed all of them, and they needed you.
For what?
To remember and to let go.